I live most of my year in St. Louis. It's home to me and has been for almost my whole life. I love it, but as anyone who enters my house can clearly see, my heart lives in Maine, and specifically off the coast of Maine, camping on an island. Many people's interior decorating fits into specific categories: shabby chic, farmhouse, modern. I would describe ours as pining for down east. The pictures on the walls are scenes from all along the Maine coast. The dishes and napkin holders are shaped like lobsters, and the lamps are even made of lobster buoys. All this helps to make living in the Midwest bearable for sea kayakers like us. Our kayaks hang in the garage and in the basement. I built or had a hand in building 4 of them, and we get to take them out from time to time on local rivers and lakes, and sometimes even on the mighty Mississippi. But none of those day trips compare to the feeling of packing your boat full of gear and setting out on an adventure on the Maine Island Trail. I haven't paddled the entire trail, but I have hit a good number of the islands between Casco Bay and Acadia, including a 2-week trip from Booth Bay to Bar Harbor in 2008. My favorite pages of the Maine Island Trail guidebook to flip through when planning a new trip all circle around one region, Stonington. Every morning, before my 3 boys get up, I sit down for breakfast under one of my favorite pictures in the house. It's a shot I took of Stonington Harbor with Rock Island, my favorite island on the whole trail, about a mile out. While I don't actually have a window that looks out on this beautiful view, it's the closest I can come for right now, and I'm grateful for it. My love for Stonington began in 2002 on one of the first kayaking trips I helped lead. I grew up going to a summer camp about an hour northwest of Portland, and that summer was my first summer on staff as a counselor. I'd been hired to teach sea kayaking, and late in the summer I was asked to join the counselor and training group for our sister camp on their big summer trip. They had planned all the details of the trip, but they wanted me to come along because I knew all the rescues and could be in charge of safety on the water. Stonington is a beautiful town, built onto the hill located at the southern tip of Deer Isle. It is a very active harbor filled with lobster boats, and what makes it such a special place for sea kayaking is the number of Maine Island Trail islands in the area. You could take trips here for years and never have to take the same route twice. This is especially helpful with younger kids because they can't paddle some of the distances it takes to go from island to island on other parts of the trail, and you can easily adjust your plans if you need to. My boys, now 6, 9, and 10, had been up here once before. In 2015, when they were 2, 4, and 6, we brought our pop-up camper and stayed at the old quarry campground. My parents came too and stayed with a friend in the area, and every day we would paddle out and explore a different island or shoal. The boys loved it. They found hermit crabs in the tide pools, looked for driftwood and things that had washed up on shore that my mom loves to use to decorate her house, and even followed a treasure map to real hidden pirate treasure on Sheep Island that I had paddled out and hidden earlier that morning. At that point, though, they were still riding in the front of a big open tandem kayak, and they were too young to be ready for an overnight trip. The next year, I took my dream job and became the director of that summer camp I grew up at. It meant guaranteed summers in Maine for me and my family for the foreseeable future, but the only drawback was that I knew that as long as I was director, we wouldn't be able to take any overnight trips on the Maine Island Trail. But then came the summer of 2020. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we, along with 80% of the summer camps in Maine, decided not to run camp. It broke our hearts not to be able to provide the summer of fun and growth for all the kids who come, but the one silver lining was that it meant that there would be a window of time for us to be able to take an overnight trip on the trail. In fact, we got to do 2. The first one was a 3-day, 2-night weekend trip in the Brunswick area. It was a great first trip, and the boys loved every minute of it and wanted more. From the moment I realized that a kayaking trip would be a possibility, though, I wanted to take them up to Stonington. And sure enough, in mid-July, we were able to get away for 5 days. The drive alone is worth the trip. Even though it was foggy, we took the slightly longer drive up Route 1, which goes through Freeport, Wiscasset, Rockland, Camden, and Belfast. It hugs the coast, and you get glimpses of the Atlantic all along the way. As we were nearing the Penobscot Narrows Bridge, the fog started to break, and we were treated to a beautiful view back down the Penobscot River. Shortly thereafter, we turned south onto winding country roads that led towards Deer Isle. After a quick stop at the scenic overlook on Caterpillar Hill, which gave us the first glimpses of the Stonington Archipelago, all the way out to Isle Ho, part of Acadia National Park, we were soon crossing the Eggemoggin Bridge. Our friends in the area say the tradition is to try to say Eggemoggin the entire way over the bridge on only one breath. I have yet to make it. When we arrived in Stonington, we stopped quickly to see our friends who were letting us park our car and trailer at their house. Jane, her daughter Jenny, and son-in-law Don welcomed us, and Don came down with us to help us unload and get on the water. Even though the fog was thick, we were eager to get going and out to Rock Island for our first night. As we pushed off from the boat ramp and said goodbye to Don, the fog had lightened up just enough that we felt comfortable heading out through the harbor. Knowing we had plenty of time and didn't have far to go, we headed first towards Green Island. Stonington is known for its granite, especially the pink granite you see on many of the islands in this area, and a number of the islands have been quarried since the 1860s, with Stonington granite being used all over the Northeast and even as far away as New Orleans and Los Angeles. Green Island was once an active quarry. You can pull up where the barges used to haul the rock away, and a quick walk leads you to a beautiful still pond tucked in the trees, an old quarry filled with rainwater. The boys didn't want to swim in the dark, deep water, but they did sit on a shallow rock and had minnows come and nibble on their legs. After Green, we made the quick crossing over to Rock Island and set up our camp. We knew there was rain coming the next morning, so after some island exploring and playing on the beach, we hunkered down in the trees, had a nice warm dinner, and enjoyed watching the tide go out as the lights came on in Stonington. At 4 a.m., with the first light of the morning, I was woken up by the sound of a lobster boat heading by on the way to check traps. I've often said that if a lobster boat engine was one of the options for my alarm clock, I would wake up to it every morning, my perfect alarm. With a light rain coming down, we stayed in our tents and enjoyed a sleep in.
Here is the forecast for coastal waters from Stonington to Port Clyde out 25 nautical miles. Small craft advisory in effect through this evening. Today, south winds 10 to 15 knots, becoming southwest 15 to 20 knots this afternoon. Seas 4 to 6 feet. Areas of dense fog this morning. Visibility variable to less than 1/4 nautical miles this morning.
Our initial plan had been to paddle from Rock out to Weed Island, but with the forecast of rain throughout the morning and strong winds, we decided we would do some day paddling when the rain stopped and stay another night on Rock. After a late breakfast, we were grateful to see the rain peter out much earlier than forecasted. There was still a small craft advisory farther out to sea, but we felt comfortable making the crossing over to the protected cove on Crotch Island. The paddle was a challenge, as any crosswind paddle is in a sea kayak, but the boys handled it well, and soon we made it across.
Hey, what do you think about this? How is it without this wind?
Crotch Island is still an active quarry, but the sheltered cove at the center of the island doesn't look like it's seen active work in years. The whole area is surrounded by mountainous piles of rejected granite blocks and rusted old equipment. If I was filming a post-apocalyptic movie, I would definitely use the cove on Crotch Island as one of my sets. After exploring the cove, we crossed back over to Rock. The wind had died down a bit, and the sun was out, so while the boys played on the beach with my wife, I hopped back in my boat and paddled around Green Island, enjoying its beautiful rocky shoreline. With the sun out, Rock becomes a totally different island. The water can seem almost Caribbean blue, and there are more lobster buoys than you can count bobbing up and down on the waves, their brilliant colors looking like Skittles floating underneath a rainbow. We walked all the way around the island, exploring tide pools, taking pictures, watching the lobster boats return from a full day's work, and enjoying magic hour on an island in Maine. As we woke the next morning, the forecast was for more strong winds. Weed Island wasn't an option, so we decided to get the trip back on schedule and head to our third night's destination, Hell's Half Acre. We loaded the boats and set off on the most sheltered route we could find. The breeze was strong most of the way there, but as we began our last quarter-mile crossing, it started howling. We put our heads down and charged ahead, and soon we rounded the western side of Hell's Half Acre and landed on the windward side. Hell's Half Acre is a trail favorite for many. It gets its name from being a small island across from Devil Island. In reality, it is a beautiful, long, narrow island set on a big rock. The side we landed on looked like a beach from afar, but in reality it is one big rock that gently slopes into the water. There are 2 campsites on Hell's Half Acre. The one we chose had 2 tent platforms, and the surrounding trees did a good job sheltering us from the wind. It had been a gray morning, but right as we started to set up camp, the sun broke out. We sat there and looked up at the clouds flying by overhead in the strong wind. The rest of the afternoon was spent exploring the island, watching a seagull that was fishing for crabs in the cove, and watching the tide go out. Dinner that night was followed by a delicious blueberry lemon cobbler. The next morning, we woke up and decided it would be the last day of our trip. Rain was predicted for most of the following morning, and the fact that nobody wants to end the trip and load up the car in the rain, combined with an invite to stay with our friends in Stonington, helped make our decision a little easier. With that in mind, we decided we would try to make the most of our paddling that day by stopping by a couple islands on the trail that none of us had been to. We circled around the south side of Devil Island, making quick stops at Shivers and Buckle Island. Along the way, we were treated to a clear view of Cadillac Mountain in Acadia National Park to the northeast. We then stopped for lunch on an exposed rock ledge just off of Coombs Island. As we sat there, I paused to take in the scenery around me. I had no clue when I would get to paddle up here, much less do any overnight trips on the trail again in the near future. I didn't want it to end. I love seeing my boys catch crabs, skip rocks, spot jellyfish, and explore the wonders of the intertidal zone. I love the rhythm of the tides coming in and out, the swells rolling under my boat, the rising early to the sound of lobster boats, and going to bed as the sun sets each evening. While my address is back in Missouri, this place is truly my home. But, like all trips, this one would have to come to an end at some point. So, we slid back into our boats and set off for Stonington Harbor. As we came into the harbor, we swung by aptly named Two Bush Island. As we wove our way through the boats in the harbor, we looked up at the quaint little village set up on the hill. We saw the famous opera house built in 1912 that has housed everything from plays to movies to dances to roller skating over the years. We picked out the houses we would most want to live in. Subconsciously, we were doing all we could to delay our arrival back at the boat ramp. But as we rounded the corner, there was Don with our van. We loaded everything into the car and onto the trailer and headed up for a well-earned hot shower. That evening, we walked through town and picked up a pizza from Stonecutter's Kitchen. We enjoyed our dinner while listening to Don tell hilarious short stories in a thick Maine accent. The next morning, I got up early and took my camera out to get some pictures of the harbor at sunrise. It was one more chance to be near the Atlantic and looking out onto this archipelago that I love so much. On the way home, I gave gratitude for the opportunity we had to take this trip. It had been a strange summer without camp, but the chance to take this trip as a family was truly a blessing I will continue to cherish. Someday we will get back up here. Maybe it will be with some part of a camp trip, or maybe it'll be when I get to do the entire trail. Until then, a not-so-little piece of me will stay here, and I'll keep looking at the picture on my dining room wall, waiting for the day I get to return to Stonington, pack up my boat, and head out on another adventure.